Adou Thiero will lock down your favorite player.
Said it, I'm golden. Told you I'm shining. Had to break through. Plan perfect timing. Giving no hands. Go get it.
Miami Heat picked 20th overall in the upcoming 2025 NBA draft. And so far in my draft series, I've discussed Liam McNeely, Rasheed Fleming, Noah Senge, Will Riley, Nick Clifford, Walter Clayton Jr., Cedric Howard, Nolan Troy, Ben Soft, Jace Richardson, Carter Bryant, Thomas Sorber, Danny Wolf, Maxime Reynaud, and now Adou Thiero. I want to give a shout out to everybody that recommended I look into him, and make sure to leave your comments down below of some of your favorite prospects that you would like to see me talk about next. As far as Adou Thiero, I know a lot of people aren't super excited about him because as of right now, he's pretty much just the defensive specialist, and there's some concerns on what his offensive upside is, but I do think there's a lot of intriguing things about him that could allow him to have a lot of potential in this league, starting with his measurables. At the official NBA Combine, he came in at just over 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan, which is just a great ratio. Also weighed 218 pounds. So I think he has an NBA-ready body right now. He is 21 years old, so not the youngest prospect. Did spend 3 seasons in college. The first 2 were at Kentucky, and the last one was at Arkansas. The Kentucky part does get me excited because as a rule of thumb going forward, if there's a Kentucky player on the board, the Miami Heat should just take him. Of course, we got a couple of good ones right now in Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, but the one that we all have our regrets about is when Tyrese Maxey was sitting right there and the Heat decided to go with Precious Achiuwa. So although Adou did not finish with Kentucky, he did play a couple of seasons there, which I don't think can be a bad thing. In his junior season at Arkansas, though, he put up some pretty nice numbers, averaging 15 points per game, about 6 rebounds and 2 assists, while shooting 55% from the field, which is very good. Now, the part that I have neglected to say is that 3-point percentage, which was 26%, but it's on low volume, about 1.5 attempts. It's very clear that the shooting is not his wheelhouse right now, but I think there's the potential to get there. I mean, his free throw percentage isn't awful. As a whole in college, he shot 71%, which was about average. As a junior at Arkansas, he did shoot 69 nice percent, which is just below average, but it was on great volume. It was on about 6.5 attempts per game. So one, it's a great thing that he's getting to the free throw line that much, because I know a lot of Heat fans' initial reaction to him is going to be, hey, we need a guy that could score. Yes, he averaged 15 points per game, but he can't shoot. We need some more people that can do that can put the ball in the hoop. And while he can't do that necessarily right now, the Heat also need people that can get to the free throw line, because the one guy that we had is now wearing a Golden State Warriors jersey. And I think having a guy that could get to the free throw line is just critical in these late game situations. Stop the clock, get some easy buckets. You know how that whole deal goes. And Adou Thiero is able to use his insane athleticism to do that. And like I said, the free throw percentage is okay for now. I don't think it's bad enough where it's a huge concern. As far as the mechanics on his jump shot, it's not Michael Kidd-Gilchrist-y. You know, he's got a decent follow through. The base is a bit inconsistent. I'm not sure it's necessarily one motion. I don't know. I haven't really spent the time to break it down, but he's not a shooter, you know. But I do think the Heat development staff could get him to a point where he could be reliable. There was a lot of most publications, I guess, kind of had him going right after where the Heat pick. NBA Draft on that had him at 38, which is by far the lowest. But Bleacher Report had him at 31, The Ringer at 30, Yahoo 28, and Tankathon at number 33. So he is definitely a guy that will be there when the Heat are on the clock. When, you know, a lot of these other guys we talked about, you can't necessarily say that. Listen, I love Rasheed Fleming and Cedric Howard as much as the next guy, but the reality is they may be off the board by the time the Miami Heat pick, which is one of the unfortunate things about that stupid coin flip. If you remember, the Warriors pick could have finished anywhere from like 18 to 20. I think it was tied with like the Bucks and the Grizzlies, and they like flipped the coin, drew straws. I don't know, whatever the hell they did. But the Heat, of course, lost that because we have the worst luck, and we picked 20th. Which could hurt in this case scenario when you're talking about so many great prospects that are going to be taken right around your range. But Adou Thiero will be there, and if anything, he's a good trade back candidate. You know, if the Heat want to acquire some more assets along the way, take on a developmental project, I definitely think that's somebody that they can do with Adou Thiero. Some of the player comps that I've seen are some interesting ones. You know, the first couple was Nasir Little, Heat legend, Nasir Little. Also Keldon Johnson. I saw Stanley Johnson. So those are 3 guys that had a lot of hype coming into this league. You know, some pretty good defenders, but were never really able to figure it out, especially offensively, to allow them to stay in this league. Outside of Keldon Johnson, obviously Keldon Johnson's very good player with the Spurs. Had a season where he averaged over 20 points per game. So, you know, if they're comparing Adou to Keldon Johnson, maybe there's some potential there to be a relatively good scorer in this league. Although Keldon Johnson admittedly is not the best of shooters. But specifically with Stanley Johnson and Nasir Little, like, I think those guys still had the potential to be great. It's just the shooting that really limited all the other great things that they do. Those guys were great at driving, great at getting to the rim, but when you can't shoot in the NBA, guys are just going to play the drive, and it really helps limit your skill. So I think there's some untapped potential there with those guys. Same can be said about Adou. And if you get a guy like that in the Heat system, I really think that they might be able to develop them into a long-term player. I guess the Heat did have Nasir Little in their system, but he was already, like 28 by then? And I think he's still on Sioux Falls, balling, by the way. But some of the other player comps I saw was some more Heat legends. 2 of them I like. 1 of them I do not like. The one I don't like is Mo Harkless, who in my opinion is the worst player in Heat history. But you understand what he was supposed to provide from the 3-and-D aspect. The other player comp I saw was Haywood Highsmith, who Highsmith, they certainly developed him into a great shooter. You know, he's been about a 39 to 40% three-point shooter with the Heat these last couple of seasons. While he wasn't terrible in college, he wasn't quite the shooter that he's been in now. So Haywood Highsmith is a good example of how the Heat have been able to develop some shooting. So I think that'd be nice. You know, Haywood Highsmith has turned into a good player in this league. Maybe Adou Thiero can become that. Maybe a little bit more of an upside is the next player comp I saw, which was Jay Crowder. You know, Jay Crowder's been a guy that, yeah, he's been on a lot of teams in his career, but it's because everybody wants him. Every championship team can use an elite 3-and-D guy like Jay Crowder, and if that's what Adou Thiero's ceiling is, that's a home run at pick 20. It really is. At the highest upside, like the most sliver of a chance possible upside that maybe Adou Thiero's ceiling can be, as I've heard some OG Anunoby in that aspect, I kind of get similar sizes between the two, elite wingspan, you know, allows him to be a great defender. And OG's really developed himself to be a much better scorer than I think people thought he could be coming into this league. So maybe there's a world where Adou Thiero can turn into that type of player. But now I want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses that Kevin O'Connor had listed in his Yahoo article. And of course, I'll share my personal opinion based off my independent research as well. The first strength that he has listed is his straight line driving. He said that he's a bulldozer on his drives to the basket with his muscular frame, explosive first step, and leaping ability. If there's one thing that you cannot doubt about Adou Thiero, is his athleticism, and he knows how to use it very well to finish strong in the paint, not only with layups, but he had a lot of dunks. Last year at Arkansas, I think he had like over 40 dunks, so he was getting you at least 1 to 2 a game, and he's not a guy that's afraid to finish above the trees, and the Heat don't have many of those guys as well. I guess outside of Bam and Khalil Ware, right? That's it. So I think the Heat could use a couple of more guys like that. The next strength that they have is his passing. It says even though he's not a playmaker, he can facilitate within the flow of the offense and make some occasionally tasty cross-court passes. Tasty. That's an interesting adjective, Kevin O'Connor. But anyways, like most of the prospects we've talked about, they've all been great connective passers, as I think a good way to put it, which means that when the ball touches their hands, it's not going to stagnate the whole offense, which is important because anybody that you draft at 20 is likely not going to be a star. So you want them to be able to find your other stars when they're in their spots. Really, the only true playmakers that we've looked at so far has been like Nolan Traore and Ben Sahaf. That's pretty much it. The rest of these guys have been some pretty good connective passers, and that's good that Adou Thiero can do that as well, because if he's not shooting, at least he doesn't completely ruin the offense. The final strength they have listed is, of course, his defense. Has great size, lateral quickness, and physicality on top of his 7-foot frame. He has the ability to guard across positions. A very, very switchable defender, which we know is what Spoelstra likes to employ anyways. And moving on into his weaknesses, of course, the first one that they list is his shooting. He only shot 28% across his 3 years in college. Kevin O'Connor believes that there's not many positive indicators because that percentage was very low on low volume, and he says he had a below average free throw percentage, which I don't really agree with that. I mean, he was 71% across his 3 years in college. Like, that's average, you know, and especially when you consider that it was on pretty high volume. I don't think the free throw shooting is that big a concern. I do think there's some potential there. I know Kevin O'Connor says that he has stiff mechanics. A little bit, but it's not like he has some giant hitch that you got to work out. I think he has the basics there that the Heat development staff can really narrow down. You know, outside of Hayward Highsmith, who we mentioned earlier, Josh Richardson's another guy that once they got him in their system, they really turned him into a great shooter. And there's been a number of guys over the years that the Heat development staff has developed into shooters. Like, that is something that they've proven time and time again they're very capable of doing. The next weakness they have listed is his shot creation. It says that he's able to straight line drive, but that's about it. He has a loose handle, and anytime he gets pressured, he gets sped up and forces plays. This seems to be the weakness that Kevin lists for all of these prospects, and it's like, if you're going to be a 3-and-D guy, I don't need you to have shot creation. I think Hayward Highsmith has been a productive player for the last couple of years, and he can dribble more than 3 times without turning it over. They don't need him to. That's what you got Tyler Hero for. That's what you got Bam Adebayo for. That's what Kevin Durant's coming here for, you know? I've been throwing that Durant in almost every video. And it's like, the more news we hear, it's like, it seems like it's going to happen soon. Oh, God, I'm so excited about that. But anyways, maybe you get a guy like KD. You trade back in this draft, then you draft Adou Thiero, maybe early second round, and then you still have Kevin Durant because you acquired more assets by drafting back. And it's like, Thiero is a guy that could play next to Kevin Durant. You know, it's like when you're talking about drafting these guys, you don't just got to draft for this team. You're not drafting for fit. Like, this team sucks. You're not ready to win now. Draft for maybe what a potential future team can look like. And I do think Thiero, as a potential 3-and-D threat, is a guy that could play against or play next to anybody because he doesn't need the ball in his hands. And if you are able to trade for an offensive superstar, he's a guy that could fit next to them defensively, you know? So I don't know. I kind of like that about him because the last weakness they have is his defensive discipline. It says he takes too many gambles on defense, commits avoidable fouls, has poor awareness away from the ball. If he eliminates the blown rotations and plays a lot more reliable game, that's his ticket to earning minutes. And I agree. You know, he had a much higher usage rate and I guess playing time at Arkansas than he will in the NBA. Like, he's 21, you know, it's not young for a rookie, but in the grand scheme of life, in the grand scheme of the NBA, he's young. You know, he will make costly mistakes defensively. He will commit some turnovers. And it's like, that's how you learn. The way I look at it is I like the fact that he's committing silly fouls or gambling on defense because it means that he's trying. You know, it means that he trusts himself. He has the confidence and he's out there being active, not just sitting still. And then when you learn to kind of eliminate the dumb decisions, then that's how you really become a very great defender in this league. But that's all the weaknesses. As far as his fit on the Miami Heat, when I first heard about him, I knew he was kind of a defensive guy with nice measurables. I thought he'd be kind of like a Ryan Dunn, you know, when we were all excited about Dunn coming out of Virginia last year. We were hoping he'd be a guy that the Heat could kind of snag in the second round. Of course, he was taken before we ended up taking Pelle Larsson. But just from watching a lot of the film, you could tell Ryan Dunn was a defensive superstar at Virginia. I don't think Adou Thiero is quite on that level. I'm not sure that he'll ever be. I don't even think he has Ryan Dunn's athleticism. And the reason why I was interested in that comparison is because Dunn had a pretty successful rookie season with the Suns. He was also a guy in college who was looked at as an awful shooter, but then came into the NBA. The first week, he shot like 40% from three. It died down quite a bit, but he still showed that maybe he'd be capable of one day potentially being a nice shooter in this league, and then therefore a really great player. So although I don't think Thiero will ever be the defender that Ryan Dunn is, maybe he could develop the shots in a similar way that Ryan Dunn did. And you know, for that reason, he's a guy that I would not hate, you know, because defensively, there's nothing he can't do. I read that there was games he guarded Jeremiah Fears, games he guarded Danny Wolf. So you're talking about putting him on one of the fastest guards, one of the most versatile big men. And Fears and Wolf, those are guys that I know Heat fans love. Y'all are in my comments saying how much you love those two, as do I. I get it. Well, Adou Thiero was the guy that was guarding them, you know, with relative success. And in Spoelstra's system, he will always continue to switch everything, love it or hate it. If you get him a guy like Adou Thiero, that could potentially work. You know, I understand that the Heat needs scoring, but you know what else we need? We need speed. We need athleticism. We need free throws. this team has been the slowest pace, or one of the slowest paced teams for quite a while now. I finally think they're starting to move in the right direction by getting guys like Khalil Ware and Davion Mitchell, but you need to continue to up the pace of this team because that's the way that the NBA is trending, and Adou Thiero could also allow them to do that. And in general, I'm not sure that Adou Thiero would play right away because I can't see him getting minutes over Haywood Highsmith or Pella Larson, even for that matter. But maybe you have to trade those guys. Like I think Adou Thiero can be decent insurance if you're able to trade back and get him in the second round, because this team, you can never not have enough perimeter defenders. We used to have a bunch. You had Caleb Martin, Victor Oladipo, Gabe Vincent, and within the span of like 2 off seasons, you lost them all. And I think you need to start to replenish that. Again, they started doing that with Davion Mitchell, but you can't have enough, because if you're going to extend Tyler Hero and have him out there, you're going to need some players that could help make up for his flaws defensively on the perimeter. And then overall, I think Adou Thiero would be a nice developmental prospect. I am a little concerned, though, that he's already 21. I wish he was a bit younger. You know, he's by no means a finished product, but he's had a few years to work on the offensive game, and there hasn't necessarily really been any major jumps there yet. But he also hasn't been in the Heat system. That's the part that can always excite me about these guys, is a lot of times you're a completely different prospect once the Miami Heat get their hands on you. But that's all I got to say for this video. So make sure to leave your comments down below. Do you think he'd be worthy of the 20th overall pick, or would you prefer to trade back and maybe take him a little bit later? Very curious to hear what y'all think. Make sure to like the video and subscribe. I appreciate all your support, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.